August 26, 2023. Well, I want to hit a few issues here. The ongoing Ukraine war is raging on, and at the same time, of course, we have this recent issue with Yevgeny Prigozhin, I guess his name, the head of the Wagner group, and his immediate deputy, and a security team, and then the crew of this private jet um, um, tumbled out of the sky and crashed between Moscow and St. Petersburg. Apparently, as of this time, apparently Prigozhin was killed, although apparently there was a case historically a few years back where he was also claimed to be dead, but he wasn't. So we're we're not 100% sure about that, but at any rate, the incident, it seems like that people are pretty much convinced that he's dead, although I guess they're still doing DNA tests to determine that. And of course, the story has gone out pretty much that Putin had him killed, which doesn't seem too implausible from a certain point of view. However, the particular incident in question kind of raises some questions about that too. Um, and because basically, there was some early reports that the aircraft was shot down by a surface-to-air missile, but apparently even U.S. intelligence and all parties have pretty much refuted that it wasn't that the plane uh, was not shot down by a missile. And of course, if it was a missile, it would almost certainly have had to come from the Russians because of the location. But it wasn't a missile, so that rules that out. So then you're left with, well, it looks like it was a little more spectacular than just a mechanical defect. So you either tend to think either a bomb was placed on board by somebody, or alternatively, that that it was some other kind of mishap. And some ideas. Scott Ritter, for instance, has put out some ideas on this, which I kind of think have some plausibility. I even come up with a theory of my own, which is kind of interesting as well. So, but so essentially, the Scott Ritter's idea was is see this apparently they were flying in from North Africa and or well actually maybe North Africa. Well, anyway, that area maybe a little south of that, but not too far south, and that essentially. I guess it is North Africa, right? And that they might have been carrying some kinds of munitions on board, and if they weren't stored and handled properly, something could have gone wrong, and one of them could have detonated, and that could be what brought the airplane down, which would have the same effect as if a clandestine operative had planted a bomb on the plane. Um, One reason why I would tend to think that didn't it wasn't an assassination because uh, Prigozhin had his security team, I guess, four guards, armed guards on there, and I would assume that he wouldn't have left the plane totally unoccupied. Um, uh, when they were on the ground, I would assume not, but given for security reasons. After all, he has to be worried about the very thing that people are making accusations about, right? And so, unless there's a traitor inside the Wagner organization that facilitated this, it seems like the idea of clandestinely planting a bomb on the plane would be very, very unlikely, right? Unless the guy guarding the plane had turned traitor on him, that is. So the idea that munitions were stored on there and perhaps accidentally detonated is a possibility. I had another idea, which a little more simple, but could be the armed guards. What are they armed with? If they're armed with AK type rifles, either the 74 or the 12 or something of that sort. Those rifles have a particular characteristic, and that is, unlike, say, the M16, M4 types that we have, their safety is on the right side. All the way up is safe. One click down is full auto. Two clicks down is semi-automatic. So what if they weren't being particularly careful and they actually had a loaded round in their chamber and they actually had a loaded magazine in the weapon, one of them, and let's say that somehow something caused it to click down to full auto and then the trigger got caught in something, and the thing did either a full or a partial mag dump right into the aircraft. Who knows? Randomly, maybe hitting pilots, hitting controls, or whatever, and the plane started engaging in erratic maneuvers, which caused it to lose a wing or a tail section, and it fell out of the sky. In other words, maybe an incident of that sort was purely accidental, but being a little bit careless could have caused it, for instance. Or, like I said, that maybe the guy had a grenade and the pin got pulled accidentally. I think that happened in a terrorist action back in the 1970s, back in the heyday of the various airplane hijacking. Some Palestinian terrorists, it was a lady, had a hand grenade and a pin got caught in something and pulled the pin and blew her up. So, I'm just saying it could be an incident of that sort that ended up bringing down the airplane, or it could have been the Russian government working for who could have done it. We just don't know for sure, and probably never will know, because the investigation is being conducted by the Russian government. And just like the Warren Commission and the Kennedy assassination, or perhaps even more so, there'll be so much suspicion. But at any rate, it looks like he's out of the game, and so we'll have to see what becomes of them. I mean, I understand that in the meeting that occurred between Putin and all the Wagner leaders sometime back in July, there was a guy who's known by the name Graybeard or something like that. I guess it's his code name. Putin wanted this person to take over the mission, and I don't believe he was on the airplane. So maybe Graybeard knocked off the competition so he can take over. Who knows? But I think that a lot of speculation that Putin did it directly is probably wrong, because, for one thing, he wouldn't want it to be done at that time in that fashion, particularly because the BRICS summit was just ending, which was a bigger hurrah for them, the Chinese, and all these other countries, Brazil and whatever. And so I don't think they'd want to obscure that message by doing that right at that moment when it could be done at some other time, if they were doing it. So maybe, anyway, that's my read on that subject. If you like these videos, please give me a like. We're looking for more subscriptions. Thanks to the person that subscribed the other day. And of course, you can click the bell for notifications and forward the link to anybody be interested. So going back to the war itself, well, I know that Milley and I think General Keane were saying that today that the Ukrainians had penetrated the Russians' first line of defense, I think referring to the offensive at Robogina, but really, not really. They haven't done that yet, at least as of this recording. They may have done it by the time you see it, because battle is probably going on right now. It's but the point is that, however, they have pretty much taken Robogina, and the Russians are probably pretty much out of the town, although a lot of the southern part of the town probably is somewhat in the unoccupied zone, as the Russians are bombing it heavily, and meanwhile the Ukrainians are using drones trying to interdict Russian supplies and troop movements. So it's kind of a high casualty affair all around. As always, I tend to think the Ukrainians are taking heavier casualties because they're kind of going all out with the offensive, using a lot of infantry in the open. And now that we've declared it's fair game to use cluster munitions, everybody's using them now, including the Russians. So the Russians may have dabbled a little bit in the early days, but they're not just dabbling now. So we'll see how this happens and what happens here. But right now, it looks to me that that they may very well push toward the first line of defense in short order if their offensive works. There are a large amount, apparently, last reports I've heard, that armored vehicles are coming down to concentrate. So it looks like that is probably the main point of offensive. The other areas, the offensive seem to have died down, and focus is pretty much located on the area. Perhaps they're taking heed at the last minute of our claim that they ought to focus on one point, and that is probably the point where they could make the most advance if they were successful. What's unclear is what degree of reinforcements the Russians might have to deploy on the real first line of defense, if in fact they get there. And so I would think that, based on things I've heard, that they do have other units, and I would even say that, missing that, the attacks in the northern area, most of those forces concentrated there haven't been committed to actual operation yet. So they could probably pull, maybe several brigades out of that area and move them south, maybe 15, 20,000 extra troops with tanks and so forth, artillery, and move them into that area if a breakout seemed to be beginning to happen, I would think, to push back. I mean, I don't know. So that's kind of the way it goes at the moment. But I hear, when you listen to people like the people on Judge Napolitano, they keep saying things like the Ukrainians have lost. Well, I don't think they've lost yet. I think that nor have the Russians lost. I think it's a very active battle right now. And even if the offensive finally is declared to be a failure, I don't know that that necessarily means the Russians will in short order be able to do much on the offensive either, because the nature of this conflict and the drone war that it's involved in has simply just changed the nature of the battlefield. I mean, a lot of the air power today is just little drones running around dropping bombs, little anti-tank grenades and just little explosive devices. And many of these things that particularly the Ukrainians are using are very much, and Russians too for that matter, are the kind of things you see out in the park people doing just for fun. But these things can be turned into lethal weapon systems, and they are being over there. So this, I think it's a question of that, and the terrain and the trenches and everything and the mines can either side really score a really major offensive, unless perhaps a new front is opened somewhat by surprise, and the forces that are needed to oppose it are just out of position, and the movement occurs fairly rapidly. But that hasn't seemed to be the case. And it's also unclear exactly how much Ukrainian territory the Russians really want to hold anyhow. I mean, they perhaps are holding what they want to ultimately have. And if that's the case, I mean, if you take over too much, you're involved in a guerrilla war that's going to be waged behind your lines at that point. And so that may be a limiting factor as well. At any rate, that's kind of how that goes. Say a few words also. I guess the booking of arrest and booking of President Trump has occurred, of course, in Georgia, and that kind of a sad event. I think it's the charges in that case are particularly way overstretched, as I've said before. I would tend to think that Trump would ultimately win that legal case. I believe. There may be some of the people, they've tried to rope everybody together like it's a RICO case, but I don't think it is a RICO case. And once you knock down the RICO case theory, I believe that the cases separate out, and the people that broke into the voting machine or whatever, if that case ends up being a real crime, then that may be a problem for them. But I think the idea of the people, the alternate electors, not fake, alternate, and the other, people involved, people out for various legal opinions and stuff, I think that case will ultimately fail. But it may get to appellate level courts before it actually does fail. And that, again, as I present in other videos, presents a problem for us. At any rate, but it's a sad event. I think that Trump did a very interesting looking mugshot. I guess it's an act of defiance, I guess is what it's supposed to be. And I guess it's working for that, to send that message. But anyhow, that's going on. The other thing that's brewing out there is that there's some people who are intent on trying to use this insurrection clause in the 14th Amendment against him. And in a way, I think it'd be good if one state actually does it, because the quicker that gets done, I think that what happens is that will be appealed, and the resources Trump will bring to bear, I'm pretty sure it will get to the Supreme Court fairly quickly, because it would mess up the whole election if you start having one state go one way and another state go the other on an issue like that. We need to actually have a ruling, was there or was there not an insurrection? And my argument is there won't be one. That won't be insurrection will be not ruled, and that will probably end that particular stunt. But I think that card will be played also at some point. Anyway, that's about it for this time. I will, of course, be posting on Rumble as well, and of course the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. I guess we call it X now. I do post a fair amount on X in between videos, so if you want to look for any updates, for instance, particularly on the war, I will, probably, or other issues, I will be posting things there if anything significant happens between the next one. So that'll be it for this time. Until next time.